The Pulse Pounder AR, as of recording, just came to the game. It is the new AR from the Invasion weapon set. It does very high single target damage with a low mag size, but a pretty good reload speed, some fancy new 6 perks, and an extremely accurate ADS. However, that ADS does also lower your fire rate tremendously without any damage bonus as of recording. This weapon is mostly meant to be hip fired. That's why I'll be hip firing throughout the rest of this gameplay. And I also want to mention that I have covered this weapon in a 160s video. So if you guys want to see the Pulse Pounder AR with a full stacked lobby in the highest zones in the game, that is where you want to go to check it out. As of today's recording, you will be seeing lots of gameplay of me solo in a 140 zone. That is specifically to compare this to the other weapons in my series. If you guys are not aware, I've made best perks on just about every relevant weapon in the entire game. I have missed out on a few dozen, but a lot of those are super unpopular weapons, really bad weapons. And the rule of thumb is if Beats doesn't have a video on it, that's typically a bad sign. So in order to keep this consistent with all those other videos, I have recorded this solo in a 140 zone just like usual. Of course, time has passed. I have a higher power level now. Superchargers exist. I'm power level 140, so I'll be doing a little bit more damage, but it's going to be a good representation of whether or not this weapon is good. And that is more of a philosophical debate. I'm going to tell you, kind of no. It's a super slow fire rate. You are going to be reloading kind of constantly because it only has a 16 mag size, but that single target damage can be really good. And if you're looking to perk this weapon, let's talk through the different options. So I have a standard crit build just built here that is typically recommended if you don't really want to use your brain, but the 6 perks do change things a little bit, and what team perk you're using also matters a lot. So if you're using like the standard preemptive strike or blast from the past kind of build, you might want crit rate and crit damage because you want to crit more often, and you want to crit more often and do more damage while you do it. A lot of the old builds might be like fire rate and damage, but again, you don't have a lot of ammo to spare here, so you want to make every shot count. And a lot of you might consider running double crit damage for that. However, you only have a 10% crit chance, and I'd only really recommend a double crit damage build if you're running with a totally rocking out loadout where you're going to be upping your crit rating and critting more often. That is definitely a more viable option. I typically recommend to run crit rating crit damage or double damage. Double damage will be less than a crit rating crit damage build, but it will make sure that you're making every shot count. So it's kind of up to you on how you want to play. I also want to mention double crit rating, where a lot of people ask me why not to use double crit rating, and I want to explain it very simply. So crit rating is adding 30 crit rating, which brings the crit chance from 10% to 38%, which adds 28%. I have a chart that I will link down below where it shows 30 crit rating translates to 28% crit chance. However, the two are only interlinked so well because as the crit rating goes higher, the chance goes lower. And if you add a second crit rating perk to this, you'll actually only be getting a 41% crit chance bonus, meaning that second crit rating perk is only actually adding 13% higher chance to crit, whereas the first one was 28. So the second crit rating will be less than half of the first one, and that is what we call diminishing returns. So I never really recommend double crit rating for weapon damage. Some people use it to like activate a certain ability more often, like Zenith, but that only applies to bows, and there are certain edge cases where that can make sense, but in this case it does not. You really don't want to run double crit rating on this ever. It's not recommended at all. And this is also a super accurate weapon. So while I don't typically recommend headshot damage, it does have a massive headshot multiplier as far as ARs go, and you will be doing tons of damage if you can hit those headshots. But you'll also be doing plenty of damage if you just hit fire to their body spamming crit builds. So it kind of depends on what you're going for. What I think is most interesting are these 6 perks, and we have 3 different options. The first one that I have on my weapon is damage dealt to enemies below 15% will immediately eliminate them. That is a 6 perk that looks really good on paper, but it doesn't seem to affect mist monsters, and that's the kind of thing that might change in the future. I'm not really sure if that's just specific to the time that I'm recording this, but in the future, potentially, if that does affect mist monsters, that is extremely good. That means smashers, zappy faces, you got the takers will all have effectively 85% of their health, because once they get under that, the next shot will instantly KO. As of now, as far as I'm aware, it's only working on normal zombies or not at all, and in that situation, it becomes a little tricky, because if you're shooting a normal zombie, typically a baby or a regular zombie, maybe even a husky husk, is almost certainly going to be dead from any non-crit hit from this weapon, even under 15% health, because it does a lot of single target damage. Each single bullet is packing quite a punch, and that extra 50% might not be that helpful on them. So in the future, if you are aware that this is functioning on mist monsters, I actually recommend this 6 perk as the main one, but there are a couple of other options, one of which is only fun because of the time being, where each hit is applying a stack of slow that is not necessarily slowed and snared, that is slowing everything. Their movement speed, their rushing speed if it's a smasher, their attacking speed, it completely immobilizes the enemy to the extent that when you reach 10 of them, they just freeze for 3 seconds, which is super, super useful. The fire rate on the AR isn't super sufficient enough to like really take advantage of that, and 10 stacks is kind of a lot. If you're using this with a 16 mag size and you don't have any support perk like Light Show Spitfire or Assault Ammo Recovery to buff how much ammo you have before you have to reload, you're only going to get 6 shots from your magazine with a frozen target if you lay every single shot into that target. And then stopping to reload right when they freeze is kind of a dumb thing to do. So I don't know if I completely recommend this for the AR, but there is also kind of a caveat. This will not be true in the future. This is only for the people watching this video upon release, but as of now, there's a bug in the game where when you're using the Pulse Pounder or any of the weapons that have the 6 perk, all damage will slow and then freeze enemies. So turrets will freeze a smasher, your traps will slow everything down until they freeze. It is super broken, super overpowered, not intended whatsoever. So if you're watching this in the future, you can ignore this part, but if you're watching right now, give it a try. Give it a try. Corey perk this and play some traps down. I promise it'll be a super fun time. The mission won't even be difficult. And finally, that brings us to our final 6 perk, where if this weapon hits an enemy, your shield is replenished for 3% of the damage dealt, and you gain 20% max shields for 8 seconds, which is kind of decent on paper, considering you'll get more health in general. Obviously, this will not pair at all with a Blast from the Past build because you don't have shields with that team perk, but if you're running Totally Rockin' Out or any kind of standard team perk, I list them all in this video, link down below, you will have maybe a good time with that, but I don't really feel like that extra shield is necessary. Shield in this game goes pretty quick. Even 20% extra is not going to keep you alive that long, and if you're going to be regenerating any kind of health, you want it to be your green health, and there are lots of support perks for that. I could talk about that in a whole Soldier Loadout video, link to that down below. I am planning on updating that video, so check the pinned comment if that video comes out. I will recommend you watch the newer one because the old video is old, not outdated. It just, I think a fresh take would be a better thing to do for that. So if you're looking to get a little bit of extra health, I don't think wasting a 6 perk is what you want to do. So if you're watching this upon release, I recommend the slow. It's far and beyond the best one available. But if you're watching this in the future where these perks are functioning as normal, maybe I'll pin a comment. I'm not really certain how I can communicate that. I think the damage dealt to enemies below 15%, immediately eliminating them is definitely the way you want to go. And yeah, as for the 5th perk, I didn't mention this earlier, but damage to miss monsters and bosses is kind of the standard. Damage to stun, staggered, frozen, and knockdown targets is great with the slow perk, but just take everything I just said about the slow perk and apply it to this and whether or not you want to use it. I think, practically speaking, damage to miss monsters and bosses is the way to go. If they ever add an affliction perk to this, you really, really want to use damage to affliction just to do more damage to those single targets. Affliction is one of the best 6 perks in the entire game. I imagine if they wanted this weapon to have that 6 perk, they would have applied it by now, so it's not really a big deal, but I figured it was worth mentioning just in case things change in the future. As for that middle perk, like I mentioned earlier, I think reload is the way to go. Mag size can help a little bit, but you're still going to have a 3-second reload if you don't have this perk, so it's something to consider. And if you're, for some reason, using Chaos Agent with this build, you can run a damage perk, but again, your mag size is so low that reloading with Chaos Agent is something that most soldiers just can't keep up with. So to reiterate on the main damaging perks, you really want crit rating, crit damage standard. Double crit damage is perfectly fine for a Totally Rockin' Out build, and if you really don't like relying on crits, which I can't blame you for such a slow firing weapon, double damage will work, albeit not be that amazing. And a lot of you might question why I'm not recommending a fire rate perk. I know this thing shoots super slow. It's like a snail designing this weapon, but to use that fire rate perk, you're getting rid of your crit rating or your crit damage, and it's just kind of a lot to trade off. So you could run like a hybrid fire rate as your top perk, crit rating as your bottom, and then like sledgehammer in the lead. That could work, but I'm almost certain that would not be the optimal damage output. It might be a very comfortable build, so give it a go if you're looking to have some fun. You have some, reperk to burn, but I'm not sure if I'd necessarily recommend that. And then as for the elements, we have a lot of options here. I'm just kidding, it's only energy, and I think that's definitely where we're going to end it off. So now you know how to perk your Pulse Pounder. I think a lot of the older players already knew this, but I think talking about a fun weapon is definitely something I have to do. Considering a lot of new players watch my videos, I figure this might help you. And if you're one of those new people, you're welcome to subscribe. Stay tuned for more. I'll see you guys in the next one, and take it easy. And then